You live in South Carolina or Georgia, you want to purchase a boat, but every boat that pops up doesn't have a title. What do you do? This video we're going to explore the different options you can do when you run across these boats and they don't have a title. I'm standing in front of my 1448 Fisher John boat that I purchased about a month or two back. Luckily, I didn't have to go through any of the hoops and hurdles to get a title and registration for this particular boat because the person did actually have all the documentation. But when I was doing my search for this boat, I had a heck of a time trying to find a John boat and an engine that came with a title. It really eliminated a lot of different options out there for me, so I decided I wanted to do some research and figure out what can I buy that doesn't have a title that I can legally get a title for, register it, and sell it. I'm going to cover both Georgia, but mostly it's going to be South Carolina. I have Georgia in on it because I am just miles from Georgia. So when I do a search of boats, half of them, if not more, depending on what it is, a lot of them come from Georgia too. If you were to buy a boat in Georgia at this particular time, in 2020, Georgia went to a online title state. So whenever you purchase a boat in Georgia, you're going to actually be issued a online title. They store it in their database. You won't get a hard copy anymore. It's going to all be personal online. Anything prior to that 2020 date, you can still register that boat as long as you continuously register that boat. If it was prior to the titles and you didn't have a title on that, the registration is still good. They're not going to force you to go out and get a Georgia title, but you can continue to register that boat in Georgia just as you had previously without a title. If you're interested in a hard copy in Georgia right now, 2020, you have an online only, they will send you a paper copy of your title. You have to pay for it. Online is free. If you want a paper copy of it, you have to pay for it. Now that is for boats with a motor on it. If I wanted to row this boat, row your boat. If I wanted to take this boat out and manually move it around, kayaks, the little pond prowler I have, some of the smaller canoes, rowboats, if you don't have a motor on it, you do not have to have them titled and or registered, because pretty much if you don't have it, it's pretty much just the registration we're really worried about. If you're going to put a motor on any boat in Georgia, you need to have a registration, which means you have to have it titled. Motors in Georgia do not have to be registered. They do not have a registration tag on any outboards that are sold in Georgia. So keep that in mind too if you're in South Carolina. If it's a Georgia motor, it's not going to come with a title and or current registration on it because it's not required. In Georgia, if you want to sell your boat and it's a online title, all you have to do is a bill of sale, and that bill of sale is going to be your receipt to Georgia, to the state of Georgia. It's got to be signed affidavit. They actually have it online, I believe, a bill of sale document you have to fill out. Once that gets sent into the Georgia DNR, they'll transfer that online record from the previous owner to you. If it was a previous boat, as far as it not having a title, basically not being titled, it'll be registered. They're going to give you the current registration sticker, and at that time I do believe they're going to issue an online title for that boat, and then you'll be able to register in your online in Georgia. Those are the takeaways from it. If it didn't have a title, you're probably going to have to go through a little bit of hoops and paperwork and bring in the tag. This boat is a good example of it. This boat was not registered. This boat was not currently registered or titled when they bought the boat. The previous owner bought the boat. So they had to go to the Georgia DNR. They had to get it validated. They had to get a new tag made for it and get it registered in Georgia as a whatever serial number they put on it, which is funny. The serial number on this starts with GA for Georgia and then numbers after it. So that's how they're registering the boats now in Georgia if it never had a title before. And once that was done in their database, he was able to get a title, which I now have a title in South Carolina. That brings me to South Carolina, the state that I live in. A little bit more difficult in South Carolina because we are a hard copy title state. Anything that's got a motor needs a title and registration, period. Canoes, whatnot. If you're going to put any type of motor on it in South Carolina, plan on getting a registration for it. If it's a kayak or like my John boat that was never registered before, you don't get a title from it from when you buy it from Bass Pro Shops. They will still issue a title to you. You just need to bring in your purchase and give them the hull number and everything on it. All your kayaks have hull numbers on them. So you do need to provide them that. For South Carolina, like I said, they are a title state for boats and for motors over five horse and above. So if you have under that, you don't need a title for it. You don't need to register it. Anything 5 horse and above, you do need to have a title for it, and AK, you need to have it registered. So that's a really important takeaway in South Carolina. Now, Georgia, let's cover the motors first. Georgia's not a motor state, a title state for motors. What you can do in Georgia, because Georgia, South Carolina are really close, the bordering states are usually be pretty good with other states' laws. If it's a non-titling state, your issuing state has to issue a title for it. Come in with a bill of sale, come in with the pictures of the plates on your motor, a bill of sale obviously from the person you bought it from and what state they are in, and they know which ones are the titling states and which ones aren't. South Carolina knows that Georgia is a non-title state for the motors, so all you would have to do is bring in the paperwork that you purchased it, bring them the serial number plate. They will issue you a title for that motor in South Carolina. Obviously, if you have a title, they'll just give it to you. If it's, I'll cover the online stuff all together with the boats. Now, a boat in South Carolina, again, in South Carolina, you need to have all your boats registered if you're going to put a motor on it. Title is the best way to do it. If they have a title, you can get yourself a title and or registration in South Carolina. But believe it or not, a lot of these boats that are floating around in South Carolina don't have titles on them. They were used on somebody's private pond. The title's long gone. It may have been to a point when they didn't issue titles. You never know what the scenario is, but a lot of them don't have titles. If I'm going to go out and buy a boat, I can actually look, if they have a 2025 sticker on there, which means it's a 2024, it's currently registered through 2025, I can still take their current registration, a picture of it, a copy of it, whatever you want to do, along with the title of the owner that it's registered to. Those are the keys, not just a registered boat. It's got to be the registered owner that signs that paperwork. If I have a copy of his registration, I got a bill of sale from him and he's the owner and there's no liens on that boat, South Carolina will issue the title in your name and you can register that boat. I'm not sure if it's like a 2024 registration, if they hadn't registered it since 2022 and it's still in their name and it has been registered in anybody else's name since, and they have a bill of sale in that name, I would suspect South Carolina is going to, but you may want to call them and check on that. They are really helpful in South Carolina on actually taking phone calls on this. I talked to them about all this when I registered my boat, but I've also talked to them on the line, on the phone about this. So any questions on it, I believe you could run the registration numbers through South Carolina and tell them who the owner is, and they can answer a yes or no. They can't tell you who the owner is. They'll never tell you who the owner is, but you can actually call them up and ask them, I got an owner, he says it's his registration, this is his name, am I safe to buy this boat and get it titled and registered? And I do believe they'll answer that question for you. They're not going to say who it is, but if you give them the information, they can confirm it so you don't get a surprise when you show up at DNR and say, you know, Joe Mack doesn't own it, it's his brother that owns it, I can't give you a title. If I'm in South Carolina and I want to buy a Georgia boat, the best way to do it is to have a title for the boat. Easy peasy, you go there, you get your title. If that boat has an electronic title in Georgia, and he doesn't have a hard copy, there are two ways to do it. You can have them get a hard copy for you, but I don't think that'll happen because you got to pay for it. And it'll probably take some time to get it. Or South Carolina has not an agreement, but South Carolina understands that Georgia is a title state for online. They have online titles. Verify that he is indeed the owner of that boat via registration, because if he's got a online title for it and a current registration, then you can validate that that boat is registered to that person, and the only way he could get a registration if it was titled in his name. So therefore, do that due diligence. If you go there with a bill of sale from the current registered owner, South Carolina can validate it with Georgia that there is a title for it and issue you a title for it. That is the easiest way to do it when it comes to Georgia. If that boat is older in Georgia and it never had a title, this is the real important one to think, to understand. If that's an older boat in Georgia and it never had a title, you need the current registration. You need a picture of their current registration in Georgia, and that needs to match up with the bill of sale. So South Carolina will issue you a title if it's the current registration and the bill of sale is signed by the current owner of that registration. So you can't do it that way. If you can't get if they can't give you a title and it's not registered, I probably wouldn't buy a boat out of Georgia and try to get it registered in South Carolina. Not the most exciting video you're gonna come across on YouTube right now, but I think it's the most informative video that you're gonna come across, because I had a heck of a hard time finding a boat that I was gonna be able to title easily in South Carolina. I'm a little bit more comfortable doing it now that I did the research. I do believe there's a lot of diamonds in the rough out there that don't have titles that you really can't get a title for on the cheap. You can basically not pay a lot of money because people are scared of the fact that these boats don't have titles, that motor doesn't have a title. So rest assured you can get them as long as you do a little bit of legwork. I mean, I'm super happy. This boat I'm in process on this boat. We're about ready to do it. I've got my title and registration in hand for both the motor and the boat, and I just can't wait to get this out on the water. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please, I got a whole series on this boat right now up until this paint job right now of when I purchased the boat, cleaning it up, redoing the trailer, painting it, and soon we're going to be getting into the full build of the frame in here. So until then, like and subscribe, hit that little dingle bell for notifications when this is coming up, and until then, happy fishing.